Hello and welcome to another episode of Nationalist Radio America for the week of October 23rd, 2017. The week has just begun and yet we have much to talk about. Too much, in fact, to cover here. But we'll tackle a few hot-button issues tonight. I'm joined tonight by D-Used. D-Used, welcome. We'll start off by talking about one of the more tame topics, the Harvey Weinstein case. Harvey Weinstein has now left his rehab after only a week. He will remain in Arizona for another month or so, according to TMZ, to continue to work with his doctors. His treatment focused on dealing with his anger, his attitude toward others, boundary work, and the beginnings of work on empathy. Weinstein was fired from his own company, lost his wife, and the MPAA has expelled him from its voting membership, amongst other things. So the question here, primarily in my mind, is this. Is a 65-year-old man capable of rehabilitation? Should he not, in his 65 years, have already learned to deal with his anger and understand things like boundaries and empathy?
Well, I've been working with a guy who just got recently hired at the place that I work at. He's about 57 years old, roughly. So he's an old dog, and I've been telling everyone you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And it's proving it more and more every day. I don't think Weinstein is much different, especially someone who's been doing what he's doing for so long.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, especially when a culture surrounding the very things that he's doing exists. You know, granted, yeah, he's been sort of excommunicated from what is going on in Hollywood, but if he tries to get back into it, I mean, the guy is, wealthy, there's no questioning that. If he gets back into it, what's to stop him from reoffending? What are your thoughts, I guess? This brings up to me a larger topic of sort of recidivism and sort of sex crimes. I don't have the numbers on hand, but I know for a fact that overall recidivism rates is something like 76%. Can people be rehabilitated, do you think?
Well, that's a pretty broad topic to go into. The rehabilitation itself, I always found to be kind of a leftist thing where they just have like this idealistic, we can fix them attitude that seems to go along with their egalitarian mindset and whatever else they decide to believe one day. I would say in general, no. Once you condition someone to be a certain way, or like when environmental factors condition someone to behave a certain way, it's very hard to get them to stop.
That's kind of how I feel. I have a history in corrections. That's kind of my background. And one thing that I see, sort of a misconception in the public image, is that the average prisoner goes to prison, minds his own business, doesn't commit any crime while in prison, and comes out a changed, better man. And not in all cases, of course. But in reality, and let me tell you, it's pretty startling. You work in there long enough, you see that these people are actually still committing crime in prison, and these people are being released. Every crime that exists on the street, prostitution, drug trafficking, assault, battery, witness intimidation, rape, the list goes on and on. All these crimes exist within the prison system, and as such, I guess I have something of a bias. I went in thinking that people can be rehabilitated, but seeing that, and widely, I mean, it is, even in the minimum units, the trafficking of things like tobacco is extremely profitable. So I find myself now not believing at all in the idea of rehabilitation, and certainly not in the American system where, again, the recidivism rate is 76%. Something is wrong.
Very much so if the recidivism rate is that high.
Well, it absolutely is. I think that's for federal prisoners specifically, so I want to be at least intellectually honest in that respect. But yeah, 76%. And I'm sure you could pull up your own state's recidivism rate, and it's got to be, around there. It's pretty abysmal. It's pretty abysmal. And I guess let's talk about prison for a minute. Do you think it's better to from I guess a humanitarian standpoint, right? From an ethical, moral standpoint, is it right to throw somebody in a cell and kind of throw away the key? Is that better for society, do you think?
Well, when I consider most policy changes or anything, I like to take into account like the genetic factor, I guess. Like where am I when I'm doing this? Because not all places are created equal, obviously. I would say different cultures develop different ways of. This is a big topic. Geez, different cultures develop different ways to rehabilitate, I guess, or to punish their criminals. They have different justice systems. Some of them as simple as throwing a burning tire on their neck until they die. That's always a good one. But I would say this idea of a holding cell for the criminally inclined, you could say, is works. It works in a high trust, homogenous society where the person generally will feel bad for what they're doing, where they have time to think it out, where they can maybe go out in the community and see like what they're missing. These people, like, they're more docile, they're less likely to reoffend. The time will dampen their need for reoffense anyway. But there's people that are better suited for that kind of punishment, and then there's people that aren't. And I think we're experiencing an increase in population of people that aren't suited for that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I found personally that one of the most fundamental issues with the current sort of criminal justice system, aside from things like the impractical and unfair sentencing practices, right, where two people can commit the exact same crime, and because of the totality of circumstances, one gets 1 month of community service and the other person gets 15 years. Aside from things like that, put yourself in a criminal's shoes. Let's say I don't know, let's use the worst example. Let's say you commit like second-degree murder, right? You don't mean to do it, it's not premeditated, and you kill somebody. And you go to prison for, let's just say, 15 years. And let's say you committed at the age of 30. You get out at 45. And at that point, you have probably made very little, right? Because you're going to be stuck in a maximum security unit. And the rate of pay for maximum security inmates is very low nationwide. It's, I think I had janitors making something like 20 cents an hour. I mean, it was abysmal. And I'm not saying that's a problem as such, right? But I think it is an issue. So then you get out at 45. You have no money. I think the prison gives you, a fraction of a sort of salary to get started, something like $100 or $500. Sort of like, hey, here you go, you served your time. But then you have nothing to live for. Your friends have all moved on, the world has changed, and what is to stop you then? Of course there are programs, but what is to stop you then from committing a new crime? So I do wonder, frequently in fact, is it better to just say, hey, after a certain severity of crime, you're locked away for life, period. I mean, you're stuck there. The taxpayer can pay for you and you can die there. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I agree that once you're in there for a certain amount of time, it's almost as if you've taken an entire chunk out of your life. You literally have taken a chunk out of your life and just kind of thrown it away to the wayside. You didn't really do much, didn't contribute anything to your own life. You just sat there and like wasted away that much more. It's as if you got a handicap on your entire life, like the record of your entire life. And I could see a person going, you know what, screw this. I'm just going to continue. I might as well turn to crime. It's quick, it's easy. It's something that's the only thing that I was around when I was even in prison to begin with. So they're more inclined to do that when they come out, I'm sure. Like you were talking about the recidivism.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I know if I was in that situation, because you have to look at hiring prospects, right? Who's going to hire a murderer? It's a real problem. It's not one that I have a solution for. It's not one that I want to act like I have any solutions for. But it is a problem, and I don't think the current system is working. But I don't have a better one in place, because one of the issues, as you brought up, is we no longer live in a sort of high trust society. Um, People can get out. They still hate the system. They still hate the man. They still hate the society they live in, and they have no incentive to be better, right? I feel like once upon a time, and it may just be, I don't know, rose-colored glasses or something. I feel like once upon a time, though, you were thrown in jail. I think of almost an Andy Griffith style past, right? Where we have this slap on the wrist, right? And the people that commit the crime knew that they were doing wrong. And we've lost that in many ways. And I've tried to examine where that comes from, but I haven't gotten any solutions. Things like this Harvey Weinstein case, where there's a whole culture around it, this whole casting couch culture. I don't think it's fixable. I just think the whole thing has to honestly burn to the ground and start anew. I don't see a fix for it. I don't see a fix for street level crime either, because you have these, low IQ, impoverished people committing crime and feeling absolutely no remorse for it. That maybe is the issue. Maybe it's a sign of this cultural, I don't know, cancer on society, that people just no longer feel remorse for committing crime.
Yeah. I'll add that I think with most every issue that we come across in this modern age, it can pretty much be affected by just attacking the bigger issue, and that's the issue of our changing culture. The things that we had come to know as normal are not so normal anymore. They're very much so changing, and these almost everything we see is like, well, how do we deal with this big change? And it's like, well, why is that changing? If you follow the string up enough, it's just all of these traditional, all of these things that have come out of our culture are no longer we the roots of it are gone. Like the culture created these systems, and these systems are still there trying to function, but the culture is no longer there.
Yeah, you look at how long America's been around, and it's been what? My math isn't great, but almost 300 years, let's say. 250 or so. And it's, I mean, the lofty ideas, I think, do withstand the test of time. But what doesn't withstand the test of time is people. Cultures change. Rome is a fantastic example. The empire looked very different toward its decline than it did at the beginning. And maybe part of me says, well, we should really re-examine our legal structure from the ground up. But that's not an effective way to look at things, because then you have an ever-changing legal system where morals and mores are constantly changing. That doesn't make any sense. I don't have a fix for it, but I don't know. It's something interesting to talk about, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say addressing the legal system is akin to you're trying to change that based on the bigger thing changing, which is the culture. It's changing and making the legal system obsolete. If you just keep on changing the legal system to match the culture, you're just going to keep changing it no matter what. If the culture remains the same, the legal system that we had would have been just fine.
Yeah, I think so too. But it's obviously not. It's obviously not.
Yeah, and going with that, I will rebut myself and say it's easier to change something small than it is something big, and that is a much more lofty goal, is to try to change the culture back to where it was.
I think in many ways the culture doesn't need to go back to where it was, but there must be, kind of like Loaded and I talked about in the last episode, there must be a common sense, right? People must feel like there is a reason to feel guilt and to feel shame. I don't believe in Nietzsche spoke about this sort of need for people to feel guilty all the time. I don't believe in that. But you have to feel some shame, right? You've violated social trust by committing a crime. So you must feel some shame. But we see time and time again, and I don't think it's even the majority of criminals, but we see time and time again that, these opportunistic crimes, and there's absolutely no guilt, no remorse. And I truly doubt, for example, that Weinstein feels any remorse, because how could you feel remorse in committing a crime that no doubt hundreds of others are committing? The list was huge that I saw. We're talking people like Kevin Spacey, Roman Polanski. The list goes on and on and on and on. So there's a culture around it. How can you feel guilty when you've created a culture that endorses that behavior? Like with rap and these other sort of decadent cultures. How can you feel guilty about committing a drive-by shooting when it's glorified? I don't know.
I totally agree. It's literally that saying. That's where that saying comes from. Is like, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you? It's because people actually do what their friends are doing. It's like, well, hey, I at least have people that agree with me on this. We may all wear pink tight shirts and walk around in our underwear in public, but at least we're all together doing it.
Yeah, and I think maybe serial killers are kind of like, or even like mass shooters typically are a great example of sort of a true like lone wolf type attack, right? These people typically act alone. But like street level crime, there's a whole culture around it. The mafia, organized crime, again, a culture. So you're reinforced by these people. And I don't know. I mean, they say that crime rates are on the decline overall, and I'm happy to believe that, but there's no question that we still have some serious issues with crime rates in America.
Yeah, there's certain regions that are truly awful places to be, and they're going to stay that way, I'm sure, for the foreseeable future, even while crime rates drop, just because of the culture surrounding what goes on there. It's like, of course, if you tell a kid that growing up selling drugs and shooting people you don't like and having promiscuous sex with random people that you can get with, and not generally just not caring because maybe one day you'll be a superstar, you'll be famous, just because, with no input of your own, no application of any resources you've learned or picked up at all, just by being real or hard, you're just suddenly good. It's one of those leftist idealist fantasies that they like to tell people. Basically, just believe in you'll get wherever you want in life and everything's fine and peachy. It's a different way of. It's in the same vein. It's just different. You know what I mean?
Yep, I totally hear where you're coming from. I think, okay, Trump had that, the grab her by the pussy tape, right? I think in many ways it's sort of a despicable thing to say, but he quantified that by saying something really interesting afterward. And let's not, I mean, we're both men. Let's also not act like we've never had a conversation similar to that. Of course we have. Every man who has even lived a remotely masculine lifestyle has something similar to that at some point. But anyway, the point is he quantified that by saying something very interesting. And it speaks, I think, to sort of the power disparity and this gets back to kind of the Weinstein case, is a power disparity, right? Trump has something that people want from a social perspective. He has power through money, right? And so he says, they let you do it. And I'm not sure. I think sometimes, like, does that still make it wrong? Because I think it is wrong. You know, if somebody, how do I put this? So Weinstein and these other people, right? They kind of coyly would say, you know, hey, you know, if you show me your tits, I'll, you know, give you a job, haha. And the girls are kind of like, oh yeah, sure, okay, whatever, right? Or, you know, maybe it's something more sinister, like, you know, sexual favors or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's still like an exchange, isn't there? And so, who's to blame, right? Is it him for, I guess, offering that? Or, and I don't want to sound like I'm, you know, victim blaming. Of course, Weinstein had legitimate victims who he, you know, truly, by definition, sexually assaulted and perhaps raped. Of course, you know, and I don't want to discredit that. But there is kind of a quid pro quo there in some cases. And who's to blame there?
I agree. Yeah, there's definitely a pressure from one side to the other for the person to, for the, let's say, the woman to agree to those terms. You know what I mean?
I think of the example of the healthcare worker. There are a lot of things that a healthcare worker can't say and can't do by virtue of their position, which is as there's sort of a power in being a healthcare worker, right? They're considered an authority. So there are certain things you can't say or do because of that power disparity. The same with law enforcement officers and the populace. There are certain things they can't say and can't do simply by virtue of their position. Do you think that maybe those restrictions and those laws should be enforced on the elites?
Yeah, I will say, as Spider-Man likes to put it, with great power comes great responsibility. That is very true. Like, if you have authority and power over others, you wield a bit of blame for things that happen to others. You know what I mean? Uh, there's a an expectation that you are going to be a good leader or a good boss. There's an expectation that you won't lead your underlings off a cliff, or people that follow you, or whatever. Just a role model in general.
So in like the healthcare setting, let's use a hypothetical. A doctor says, maybe, I don't know, mixing ibuprofen and alcohol is a good idea, right? He tells that to a patient. And then the patient goes out and takes a bunch of ibuprofen and drinks a lot of alcohol, and they die. The doctor would be held at fault. Of course he would. But is the person that died to blame? I mean, we have to talk about agency and things like that in these cases. So obviously that person made a choice to not do their due diligence and research and determine, hey, that was a really stupid idea. But also, again, this is well established. This goes back to antiquity. There is a power coming from what those people are saying. And so in like the Weinstein case, can you blame the victim at all? I mean, if he says, hey, the best way to get a job is to, be on this casting couch, can they be blamed? Do they have agency, do you think? I mean, I think it's a conversation really worth having. Do these people have agency? Are they the victims also to blame for not whistleblowing on this, and by not whistleblowing on this, perpetuating that culture?
Yeah, that's a deep philosophical subject we could go into, about the natural human tendency to defer to powerful or powerful men or women, I guess. Um, But yes, there is a lot of there is that factor of, you have to watch out for yourself. There's self responsibility in that. So I suppose it's a mix of the two in a way. But in Weinstein's case with these women, I feel like they do have their ulterior motives. Like they do know that he can in fact set them up. They understand like that he is in Hollywood a powerful man, and they know what they want to get from him. Um, and he knows that as well. So there's almost an agreement there. And I'd say this big coming out of like, now after 20 years, I'm finally saying something is uh, maybe less virtuous and less, let's just say virtuous, than it appears to be. You know what I mean? Like they knew what they were getting into to a degree, but there was also a lot of pressure from the powerful in that whole situation. And humans do have a natural tendency to defer a lot of responsibility, like a lot of bigger things like political stuff. They like to defer it to whoever they think will do it best. Uh, what do you think about that?
Well, absolutely they do. There is a modesty, I think, in the lower class of man to sort of believe. I spoke with another guy on Discord about this. I think that wisdom is kind of a lower class virtue, the sort of Socratic idea of I know nothing. And I think as you gain status, that wisdom goes away. And so that wisdom comes with another side, right? The wisdom of believing that you know nothing, and I guess in many ways knowing you know nothing. The other side of that coin is the thought, sort of the nagging thought that somebody may know something, right? Because saying I know nothing is a very humbling, modest idea. And then you have these elites. I've yet to meet one who doesn't believe he knows something about, like somebody gets rich with Wall Street. He would probably fairly say, well, I know how the market works. That's how I was successful, right? So I think there is a natural deference to authority, and perhaps for good reason. But then one must ask, like, what do these people really know? Do they know anything? Is it which is better, right? To sort of illusion yourself and say, I know something about something? Or is it better to have that lower class wisdom and say, well, I don't know anything about anything, and only through reason can I come to determine anything at all? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot to get into with that. I don't know. I don't know if you want to go into that.
I think we'll save it for another time. The one thing that is for sure in this Weinstein case is this. The truly most despicable and disgusting thing is how protected this person was by all the, not just the people that, exchanged favors for roles and things like that. That is, I think, in and of itself pretty disgusting. But the donors, right, the people that he would donate to, also, no doubt, had knowledge of his activities, and they didn't speak out either because he was a wealthy donor to them. It's really, really gross. I can't think of another more simple way to put it. It's just really, really gross and really sad.
Truly. Yeah, it's like the entire Hollywood and media apparatus converged together over Weinstein like a shield, blocking arrows falling on his head, while he could cower away.
Yeah, and he did it for a long time, as many of these people did. Another really sad thing is the Poppy Day parade. Have you heard about this in the UK? They have the whole poppy. The poppy is sort of a symbol for Remembrance Day and all this. So the Poppy Day parade could be canceled due to police cuts. Leicestershire Police, Leicestershire is a county in the UK. Leicestershire Police have said that they have 500 fewer officers in their county than there were 8 years ago. Due to the cuts, the British Legion may be required, in order for the annual parade to continue safely, to hire private security on their own dime. Of note, Remembrance Day has been a tradition since 1919, a tradition inaugurated by King George to commemorate the end of hostilities on the Western Front. And I'm probably going to butcher this name, but the Melton Mowbray Parade attracts around 10,000 people annually. Parades of this type have been televised since 1946. Jim Rawlinson, chairman of the county's Royal British Legion, said they could still put on a parade, but it would be trimmed down. What does this mean to you? Sort of what significance does this play? To me, it's a tragedy, and I can't help but wonder why Leicestershire County has 500 fewer officers than 8 years ago. What do you think has spread these people so thin, and what does the potential cancellation of, I guess, police support? I don't think the parade itself is going to be canceled. Somewhere I read that they only need to raise £1,000 to be able for it to continue successfully. So I don't think it's going to end. I think that's kind of alarmist and unproductive. But the real tragedy to me is that police cannot use their resources anymore to have people support this long tradition. What does that mean to you?
Right away, I find myself really lamenting the lamenting's a really good word for it. It's just, I see the general decline happening. I see the general, we can't afford to do this anymore. They don't see it as very important, because really, what do they need? £1,000 to put on the thing? Maybe they just needed a little bit more community support to put it on. But it seemed as though the culture itself is decaying in such a way that these things just aren't happening on a regular basis anymore, and I find that to be a little bit sad.
Yeah. I think in America, maybe an equivalent might be sort of like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, right? These things are televised every Thanksgiving. It's very much a part of a tradition, regardless of whether or not you support it. Let's at least agree that it's pretty damn cool, right? It's kind of cool to sit in front of the TV and watch these things if your city doesn't have a parade that you can go out to and experience on Thanksgiving Day. And the solemn nature and the sort of important tradition of remembering the fallen, to not even have enough police to even support that is just so sad. You have to wonder where this money is going. Well, I guess there's no surprise where it's going. Leicestershire County is right next to London, and we all know what happened to London, but it's just so sad. Our money can't even be used to support traditions like a Remembrance Day Parade. It's so sad.
Yeah, the money is it's more important if the money goes to help these poor immigrant families that need, apartment complexes for their 15 children, and welfare and food stamps and whatever else for their multiple wives and everything else that we need to have here because they're enriching the culture there. You know what I mean? It seems like it seems like it's, what's happening when you put the two together. You're like, oh, I see. That's why no one cares. The population itself, the demographics themselves are even changing. These people don't care about these, or more and more. There's a growing amount of people that don't care very much about English or even Western tradition and values and holidays.
Yeah, there is a pushback on this. It's gained a lot of support. People are, having bake sales and doing all this, and you have to wonder who's doing that. I don't know, but I think it stands to reason it's probably not the immigrants, right? They're not the ones saying we need to save these Remembrance Day parades. So, I mean, it's just really sad to me. And, oh well, 40 police officers fewer a year for 8 years.
That's a very rapid drop.
Hell yeah, it is. And the sad thing is, too, these are people. Law enforcement is not a skill that you can transfer. There is no other path to go. If you've been a law enforcement officer for 5, 10, 15 years, you can't just jump in and, be a journeyman electrician, right? There's nowhere else to go. There is not any other school to attend, or the skills that you learn in law enforcement are not applicable to any other field. It's very sad to me, because that's the real tragedy here too, is 500 fewer officers. That's 500 fewer jobs for hardworking English men and women. Just a tragedy, and we see it. We see it happening here in the States as well, don't we? Budget cuts across the board for things like education, for things like public service. We can't afford to repair our crumbling infrastructure. Just budget cuts everywhere, and yet we dole out hundreds of billions of dollars to immigrants who typically will not repay that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, we're constantly cutting corners and still expecting to have a square.
We are indeed.
And I find it very interesting that we're bringing in populations that are statistically more likely to commit crime, and we would need to spend more resources. You would think that we would need to spend more resources on policing, but we see the opposite effect happening.
Well, you can't spend more resources on policing because that's fascistic, don't you know? That's too authoritarian. We're militarizing the police. So speaking of immigrants, yet another attack in Sweden yesterday. 2 explosions. This is reported by Peter Sweden on Twitter, by the way. I did some brief looking, but it's really hard to, kind of sift through the Swedish news, and oftentimes these things just go unreported entirely. It's like kind of like this conspiracy to cover these things up. I don't know. Peter Sweden reports 2 explosions outside apartments in Varnhem. That's now 9 attacks in 12 days. Of note, and this is just stunning, truly stunning. In 11 days, the last time I gave numbers on this was in a video, in the Alt-Wrong playbook, actually. In 11 days since I made that video, there have been 1,007 people killed, 904 wounded, according to religionofpeace.com. And this is global, mind you. That's 82 wounded a day and 92 killed a day by Islamic extremists. I hate to use the word extremists, but I think that's sort of the lingua franca. So Islamic extremists, basically people in the name of jihad or in the name of Allah. 1,007 people killed. What do you make of that?
I think we're starting to see a sea change where more people are starting to say, like, oh, look, Islam may be very bad. It may be almost 1-to-1 correlated with terrorism. It may be correlated with just a rise in, or it may be correlated with anti-women's rights and anti-homosexual rights or whatever, I guess. And it may be correlated with a rise in violent crime and theocratic, authoritarian governments and whatever else. But we've got to let them in. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. And these people are sounding a little bit more crazy by the day. I think the average person, for sure, is picking up on it and getting wise to Islam not being a religion of peace. That meme is starting to die, and it's starting to die fast.
I'm going to be doing a video at some point. I think maybe I put it off because I think that Islam is low-hanging fruit. But in my personal studies, I was able to find only around a 14-year period where Islam was actually peaceful. And that was when the Prophet Muhammad had sort of just started Islam and left left the country, kind of went to Northern Africa and began recruiting there, and then came back. And then that sort of kicked off the violence in Islam. And you're right, these people are sounding more and more crazy by the day, but then they use these neat little things like saying, well, correlation does not imply causation. But it's it's so weird because somebody can literally shout, I'm doing this for ISIS, ISIS is paying me and I'm an ISIS soldier, right? This is a holy jihad against the pagan Westerners. And they'll say, the motives remain unknown.
Yeah, how clown worldish of our media. Just that's the thing, is like the no wonder more people are finding the alt-right and going, I need to find real reputable news. Like we need some actual voices here that are saying what they actually see and not telling you that something that is red is not red. No wonder people are starting to engage in radical politics the way they are, and no wonder people are starting to say, you know what, this world needs to change, because they're seeing clown world enough. Like when you're looking at something just at pure insanity for so long, you almost have this urge to fix it. Like you're just like, I need to straighten this up, and more people are just going like, what's going on in the world right now? Because like we're like Stockholm syndrome for Islam. It's we're inviting it in, and we're just taking it, and we're telling ourselves that it's fine, that it's totally fine. And our media is like our voice. It's like our mouth talking to the rest of the body, saying, no, you're fine. You're not getting stabbed right now. Meanwhile, you're bleeding out.
I think these issues are not discontinuous, but are actually sort of part of the same process. And I tend to like to hail back to Orwell's 1984 and Ingsoc, right? We see a deconstruction of the language, which corresponds to a deconstruction of the culture, which corresponds to a deconstruction of the past, and so on and so forth. And Red Eyes TV, who I love both Henrik and Lana. They do fantastic work, and their production value is just through the roof. And I hope at one point in my life to make something half as good as what they make. Henrik recently did sort of an expose on this. Have you seen it about the Muslim Vikings? Have you seen that?
No, I've seen about the Muslim Vikings, but I haven't seen Henrik's expose on it.
So the nuts and bolts, I'll break it down for you. The nuts and bolts of it is that this super far left researcher went out, received 450,000. It's not even equivalent dollars. It was krones, Swedish krones, right? 450,000 Swedish krones, and sought to basically legitimize the role of Islam in Western society, right? So it's almost like they've recognized, oh hey, holy crap, people are starting to wake up to this. We need to now put this little, plant this seed in people's heads, and this thing got coverage globally, and the whole thing is predicated on this silk tapestry, right? Where the researcher actually added something on and said that it said Allah, right? But the thing that she says Allah isn't even part of the tapestry. She added it on. It was completely disingenuous. But we see this all the time. This revisionist history of, oh, hey, Muslims were Vikings too, right? They were respected and revered in Germanic countries. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. They're not compatible. They never have been. We've been at war literally since antiquity. Their ideas are so incompatible with ours by virtue of them saying, like, we hate you. I was telling you earlier that I spoke with this Roma Muslim living in Scotland, and he goes by the name Max, and he says and it's so fascinating. He says that Christianity is a pagan religion, which I would posit is at least somewhat true. It has some, pagan traditions wrapped up in it and all this. And he says that Christianity is a pagan religion, and that is why Islam is at war with Christianity. He justified things like the Umayyad Caliphate, the sort of rape, pillage, and slaughter of the Spanish people. He did all these things on the basis that Christianity is pagan, and they must be reformed and taught through violence and through coercion the true, not pagan religion of Islam. How is that compatible? I mean, why lie to yourself about this kind of thing?
Right. It's like one person obviously views you as the other, and they obviously have alienated you to a point where they feel like killing you is less morally reprehensible than killing an animal. They feel like converting your entire culture is their duty. They see the strong men of your culture as the enemy. They see the women as trophies, and the complete opposite is happening on this side. But I do like to see in their justification, they're trying to justify this Islamic Viking meme, which is, like you said, obviously false. They're trying to do that. It's like, it's always good to see your enemies flailing around when the wind's not blowing their direction.
Yeah, their sails are no longer catching wind, and it's sort of like throwing, well, pardon the expression, but throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? And in this case, I'm sure some of that 450,000 went to paying to have these respected news organizations pick this up and report it. Thank God there are actually people out there who are pushing against it. I think oh God, who was it? Vice or somebody actually said like, hey, no, this isn't the case. This is fake news. This is a lie. Thank God there are people out there who are actually. Maybe it was Medium. I don't remember. It was some left-leaning journo site, and I was like, holy crap! They actually picked it up and called it out for what it is. But it is. It's very ink-soaked, isn't it?
Is Medium left-wing? I saw quite a few very like apologetic towards, like, especially the alt-right stuff on Medium for some reason.
And don't quote me on this, I think Medium tends to be pretty lax in its journalistic standards. So I think they kind of just let anybody, well, not anybody, but they kind of let most people write. So I'm sure there are some, apologists in their sort of journo staff.
Well, that's good that they at least are honest in their wide net. They at least give dissenting views a voice.
I'm sure somebody in the comments is going, buck wild right now. No, they're crazy liberals, So this is on the 12th of October. A car blew up when the door opened. 13th of October, there was an explosion outside a villa. 17th of October, a bomb damages a car. 2 actually on the 18th of October, a police station was bombed, and a bomb was found underneath the car. 21st of October, grenade blew up a car. 22nd of October, a bomb thrown into a bar, 1 injured. Is that Swedish culture?
Sounds more like Irish culture to me.
Yeah, it is kind of in many ways reminiscent of the IRA, isn't it? I was reading, I want your take on this before we move on to the next topic. I was reading somewhere that in the age of decadence, an outside force can easily come in and sort of wipe the floor with the culture, the decadent culture. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing, and I'm going to get some flack for this. I think in many ways what Islam says, I've read enough of the Quran, I've read some of the Hadiths. I think that in many ways, sort of the traditionalism of Islam is to be commended, right? But I see them coming in and saying, your culture is way, way, way too decayed, way too decadent, way too promiscuous, and it's coming in and taking over that, right? And that in some ways it's because they're coming in that either the culture will fail or it will become purified and reinvigorated and reawakened. Do you think that maybe this invasion is a good thing? This great replacement is a good thing?
Is that just how things go? Is it just something that has to occur, like a great forest fire and then a phoenix rising from the ashes? Is it something? Is the decadent, disgusting Western culture something worth saving? But I like to think that it's going to be cleansed by fire in some way. The problem is, I want it to be my fire. I want, in a way, I want my idealistic fire to be cleansing this culture, that my phoenix will rise from the ashes, that the phoenix of my ideology will rise, as opposed to someone else's.
Well, I think that's a noble idea in some ways, that, the forge through which your sort of ideological purity is refined should be organic and from the people of the nation, as opposed to a reaction to a foreign influence. I think that's a noble idea. So, in perhaps the last topic, New York Daily News reports that it is time we all stop saying "God bless you" on account of it being too religiously fueled. Is saying "God bless you" just too gosh darn polite?
I don't even know what to say to that. I see it as such our culture is so decayed. It's just this husk that is like afraid to offend itself. And I mean, the common theme obviously is it almost hates itself. Everything that made it strong before is gone now. It's dying off now, and it has to do with that it really doesn't like itself. Things that are implicitly European or implicitly Christian or implicitly, let's say, straight or more so now straight, they're starting to become taboos in this culture, because this culture is radically shifting itself, like at the same time as it's being invaded, of course. It's radically shifting itself to a very feminized and very overly tolerant and overly apathetic thing. It doesn't. I don't even know where to go with it. Christianity. I don't know if you've discussed this on any other podcasts, but Christianity itself has had so much to do with the strengthening of Western culture, and so much to do. It's such an integral part of European culture anymore that it's. I don't want to use this term again, but I really lament this this dying out of it in our culture.
Well, I think "God bless you" goes beyond even sort of Christianity. Obviously, it has religious connotations, God, right? But I think the same people would be upset if you even said "bless you." They say things like "Gesundheit" and all this. These things typically mean, like, hey, get to feeling better, right? Hey, you're saying, sort of salud, right? Health, be healthy. But even that offends them. It's some sort of weird microaggression. God, I don't know to use. It's really, in the age of decadence, you do see this attraction rather to these insignificant ideas and these frivolous ideas, and the attraction to celebrity, and there's just this nihilism that pervades the culture, and the fact that the New York Daily News publish an article, opinion or not, on this. I think it really exemplifies that and typifies that very thing. Because you're so offended that somebody's being polite. And let's be honest, regardless of where you stand on the simple phrase, God bless you, it's just polite. It's been polite for years and years, at least decades.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally saying, it's kind of like the Christian version of saying, "I hope you feel better." Like, as a Christian, one would the most from the heart thing you could do for someone is pray for them, or to request that your omnipresent God, your everything, bless this person. You're basically just saying like, hey, here's a little taste of my culture when you're saying that to someone, especially like someone should, if they feel so enlightened and so like invigorated by different cultures around the world, they should include Christianity in that. It's weird that they don't see that as something that is at least interesting to hear.
I guess the other side of sort of the more pragmatic side of me says, like, can we all just agree, like, sneezing sucks? Like, there's nothing fun about sneezing? The article goes on to say that nobody likes being interrupted. I kid you not. Like, it actually says that nobody likes being interrupted. You saying God bless you is an interrupting my sneeze. What? I couldn't make it up. I wish I had the article pulled up. But yeah, literally says that, oh, well, and it's problematic if I have a second sneeze. Is it? Sneezing sucks, man. It just sucks. And I wish people would all just recognize that. That's going to be my new banner to fly under, is sneezing sucks, and we should all hope that sneezing goes away at some point.
We should all hope that God blesses us.
Absolutely. Whatever divine power is out there, please, if you hear me, do away with sneezing. D-Used, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I'm glad that you were able to make it, and thank you all for listening. This has been Nationalist Radio America. We'll see you next time.